Welcome into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. I am your host, Jet Stryer. That is your co-host, John Sapichetti, across the virtual desk from me. We are presented by Full Press Coverage. How are you doing today, Mr. Sapichetti?
I'm doing quite well, Mr. Stryer. I'll call you Mr. Stryer if you can insist on calling me Mr. Sapichetti, even though I'm 25 years older than you. I got vaccinated yesterday. I got the Pfizer vaccine, and I go back in 3 weeks for the second one. So I'm feeling rejuvenated, no side effects for the first 2 days. And, hopefully in 3 weeks we'll be able to resume some normality.
That's great news. That was my first question was going to be, are you feeling any side effects?
No, none whatsoever. I'm still a LeBron fan, so I haven't lost that. I'm still.
I really thought that they had fixed that with the newest round of vaccines, that they were going to remove that from people's brains. The microchip that they implant with the vaccines was going to get rid of all LeBron fans. That's what I was told by the QAnon message boards, but apparently they were wrong again.
They were wrong. It would be similar to when Malcolm McDowell faces the Ludovico treatment in A Clockwork Orange, and they play Beethoven, and then he now is repulsed by Beethoven. Didn't happen to me. I fought off any of those inroads made to not have me as a LeBron guy.
You have a very strong LeBron immune system.
You're incredible.
The LeBron defense mechanism. Yeah, it's resistant to any forms of vaccines. It's a great day because you got vaccinated, but it's also a great day in basketball history, Sap, because it is the 59th anniversary of Wilt Chamberlain's 100-point game. That happened in
1962. I wasn't
Don't
even
put me
born.
On the spot for math. Oh, no.
No, I wasn't even born then. I wasn't even conceived then. So I was just a star in my dad's eye. 59
my
years
dad
ago yesterday.
Was 4 years old.
Yes.
I don't think he remembers it, though.
No, you would. If it happened today and you were 4, you'd probably have some recollection because it would, dominate ESPN or Fox Sports 1. Yeah, so 59 years ago yesterday, Wilt scored 100 points, which is amazing in that it was the perfect number, right? I think it's even more amazing than if he had scored 101. 100 just sounds so cool, right? Like I said, he had a perfect game that night, and it's 59 years ago.
It is. It makes it seem more mythical than it actually is because it's 100 on the dot.
Right, exactly.
It is one of those records that everybody talks about will never be broken. And I do tend to agree with that one because the closest that it's come has been Kobe Bryant when he put up that amazing 81-point game against Toronto. I mean, that's still a very good a solid scoring output away from 100, still a 19-point mark away from 100, which is for most people is a pretty good night in the NBA. And that is the closest anybody has come since Wilt Chamberlain. And keep in mind, Wilt Chamberlain did it without the aid of a 3-point shot. Kobe Bryant obviously hit a couple threes in that game. So the question today, since we're celebrating the 59th anniversary of Wilt's 100-point game, is can someone ever match it? And who would that person be? I'm going to start with you, Mr. Sapichetti. Do you have somebody in mind who is currently playing in the NBA who you could see if the stars aligned perfectly and Mercury was in retrograde? What would happen? Could somebody hit that 100-point mark?
The player I think that could do it, I don't think he would do it because it's just unfathomable to score 100 points in a game. First of all, players don't play enough in terms of minutes. Wilt played 48 minutes that night. And by the way, Wilt Chamberlain that year averaged over 50 points per game. And this is my favorite Wilt Chamberlain stat of them all. 1961, 1962, he played in 80 games. He averaged 48 and a half minutes per game. There's only 48 minutes in an NBA game. He played every minute of every game, including overtime. You don't see players doing that anymore, right? There's, built-in load management for games, and then when they do play, you want to limit the stars to 34, 36
No, they don't make
minutes.
them like they used to, Sap.
Well, Wilt was a unique guy. I mean, we're talking about someone who was 7'1", about 275 at that point, was one of the greatest athletes this country's ever produced. You can make a case the greatest athlete that this country's ever produced. He was a track and field star at that size, incredibly strong, agile. To score 50 points per game for an entire season, that just blows my mind. The player that I think has the game to do it is Kevin Durant. But I don't see him having the temperament to do it. He's such an efficient scorer, right? But he can beat you from anywhere on the court. He's an incredible three-point shooter, great free throw shooter, has the ability to go to the line. His mid-range game is perfect. I've said this a million times since I've been watching basketball, and it's approaching 50 years that I've been watching it at least coherently. He's the most well-rounded scorer I've ever seen. Not Jordan and Shaq in his prime, Kareem in his prime were more unstoppable, but they didn't have the wide range of game that Kevin Durant has. So the easy answer for me is Kevin Durant, but Kevin Durant's career high is only 54 because I don't think he has the right temperament to go for 100. So I think he'd be the best candidate because he scores so efficiently and can score beyond three at the foul line. But again, I don't think he would do it. The player that probably has the right temperament to do it is James Harden, his teammate in Brooklyn. Now, with those two guys on the same team and with Kyrie involved, if they play together for any period of time, no one's scoring 100 points in a game unless two of them are out and it falls on one of the players. Harden does have kind of the game to do it as well because he can really heat up beyond three, and he's a guy who can go to the line 20 times, right? And that's so important. When Wilt scored the 100 points...
That's how you have to do it.
You have to do it at the free throw line and beyond three. Now, obviously, Wilt didn't have the three, nor Wilt would have not taken any threes. But the night
you have to do it at the free throw line is the most important because it's stopping the clock.
Well, the thing about Wilt is he's a career 51% free throw shooter. That night, he was 28 of 32, which is 88%. That's what put him over the top. 36 of 63 from the field, 28 of 32 from the free throw line, adds up to 100 points. Harden can get to the line 20, 25 times. So there's a free 18, 20 points right there. We know he can go off and hit 10 or 12 threes. That kind of gets him closer to the end game. I think he's the most likely to do it, even though I think Durant is the player more capable of doing it. But I don't see it being done either way. Durant's career high is 54, as I said. James Harden's is 61. Steph Curry's is 62. I can't see him doing it because he's a smaller guy, and he relies heavily on the three. Look, Steph Curry could drop 15 three-pointers in a given night. That gets him almost halfway there. We know he never misses free throw shots, but his lack of size, I think, would hurt him at some point. He might just wear down at that point.
Yeah, I made a list of a couple guys, and I can see what you're saying with Durant because he's such a gifted scorer. I do think, though, at this point in his career, he's never going to log enough minutes in a game to be able to do it.
Right.
He's just, one, doesn't want to because there's, he's trying to win a championship, not trying to win a scoring competition. And two, he's still got to load manage the Achilles. You don't want to just burst the Achilles trying to get to the free throw line a million times. Because, again, that's the most important way. That's how Wilt did it. Like you said, he was great from the free throw line that night, and you need to stop the clock when you're trying to get 100, in a 48-minute game. You need to have the clock constantly be stopped while you're putting up points. So I went a different route, Sep. I went the route of, I think somebody just needs to go bananas from three in order to do it. So I took the guys who I think are the most likely to have an absolute just unconscious night from three. If there were going to be anybody to do it, I think now it's not going to be somebody who does it like Chamberlain and is just dominant in the paint. There's just no chance of that happening anymore. So I mean, you see the most dominant paint player in the NBA is Giannis and Embiid. I think Embiid just put up his career high, which is 50, so halfway there. Again, that was what Chamberlain was averaging that year. The guys I said were Curry, as you mentioned, Dame Lillard, James Harden, as you mentioned, Trae Young, and Devin Booker. Booker's already put up a 70-point game. He did it against the Celtics. They lost that game, by the way. But again, my strategy for it, if you're going to get 100 in today's NBA game, I agree with you with the free throws. You need to get to the line, but you need to go bananas from three. You need to just absolutely be unconscious from three. I think you need to, like you said about Durant, you need to have the mentality is I'm going for it tonight. You also have to have the teammates that are willing to let you go for it and pass to you and defer to you, kind of like in Kobe's last game where everybody played hot potato with the ball, trying to get it to Kobe. And you need to have a coach who's willing to let you stay in for the rest of the game. Because a lot of times with these incredible high-scoring games that you see from like Curry or Harden, the team's usually up big. by the end of the third. Like they'll put up 50 points by the end of the third quarter, and they just won't. I think Klay Thompson's done this a few times where he's had like 40 or 50 by the end of the third quarter, and then he just doesn't play in the fourth. So it needs to be a close game too.
That's another name I'm going to throw out there is Klay Thompson. I hasn't played in nearly 2 years, but he does hold the NBA record.
Yeah, that's the only reason I left him off, Sap, because he's, he hasn't played so long.
Right, but I mean, he's not going to forget how to shoot. He scored 37 points in a quarter, which is the NBA record, and he scores effortlessly. I think he has a better chance of going off and hitting 23s than even Steph Curry, just because of his sheer size, right? I mean, Steph's 6'2", 6'3". It's a little bit more of an effort for him to hit threes than Klay, who's about 6'7". And Klay's just a catch and shoot guy. He doesn't really create his own shot. So it would have to be a perfect storm for him. I don't think he's going to do it either. But if anybody had 37 points in a quarter, you're more than a third of the way there. So that's pretty damn impressive. The name we haven't mentioned is LeBron James. That's just not in his DNA. I've always thought that when LeBron was in Cleveland and you knew they were going to lose to Golden State and they were down, 3-0 in the finals or whatever, that he may just go off and score 75 points. And he just never did that because that's just not his game. I think LeBron is more.
What's his career high, Sap? Do you know?
It's I believe 60. I think he had 60 or 59. But
yeah, I didn't mean to put you on the spot there. I'm just curious.
No, but it's in that range because Jordan's career high is 69. Michael Jordan. Obviously, we know Kobe's was 81. Jordan holds the record for 63 in the playoffs back in 1986. That came in a double overtime game. He broke Elgin Baylor's
Somebody
record,
will break that.
which was at 61.
Somebody will break
that could happen. I mean, we kind of almost saw it last year, and it doesn't even have to be a phenomenal player. Jamal Murray was going off for 50 or other players were getting 50. TJ Warren, didn't he have like a 50-point game for the Pacers?
Yeah, I think that one will get eclipsed at some point.
Because it's the playoffs, because you don't want to take your foot off the gas at that point, right? Because you're trying to win a playoff game. And the three-point
shooting is so much more heavy at this point, right? I mean, when Jordan was put it up, how many threes did he even attempt in that game? Probably maybe like 2? No one was even taking him.
In the 63-point playoff game, he did not hit a 3. No, I was at that game.
Yeah,
I was courtside for that game. He didn't even hit
a 3, so, I mean...
I don't think he even hit a 3. No one was taking threes back then. Bird would take a couple.
The line was just there as decoration.
That's all it was. I mean, I could think of like Larry Bird playing today would be hoisting up 10 threes a game and hitting 4 of them, and his scoring average would be that much different. Like LeBron's perfect game would be 30, 20, 20. I mean, I could see him pulling that off at some point in his career. 30 points, 20 rebounds, 20 assists. Kind of like Magic Johnson was a guy who'd get triple doubles, but he'd get like plus 15 on points, rebounds, and assists. That's damn impressive when you're getting more than 15 assists and rebounds to go along with scoring points. So Durant has the game. If someone just said to Kevin Durant, for $5 million, here's a challenge, go out and score 100, I think he could maybe do it, but not with the limits, minutes restriction at this point in his career. He's going to blow out his Achilles or ruin his knee to, score 100 points in a game and ruin their chances to win the title. I think Harden is the most likely.
You're probably right that it's Harden. Yeah, because I mean, he's had multiple 60-point games, and it's the combination of the 3-point shooting and the free throw shooting because you need to pile up the points with the threes, get that extra point that Wilt Chamberlain wasn't getting, and then you need to constantly be stopping the clock. And he's an excellent free throw shooter too. So that's probably the right answer is Harden because I mean he's been the best scorer in the NBA for the past decade.
Absolutely.
In terms of average.
The last 5 years, I mean,
he's going to go down as one of the greatest scorers of all time. I mean, regardless of what you think of him as an overall player, he's going to go down as probably considered a top 5, top 10 scorer of all time.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it depends what his career average is going to be. Let's not forget his first few years, he was coming off the bench in Oklahoma City, so that's going to bring the points down. But yeah, I mean, for the last 10 years, he's been essentially a 30-point per game scorer, which is damn impressive. So I think he's the one most likely because he kind of plays an old man game at some point, almost the way Paul Pierce used to. Like, I don't think Harden's going to really lose that ability to score over the next several years, because he's still really good at going to the basket. Because he's left-handed, that gives him a slight advantage. So his mid-range game is outstanding. We know he can get crazy hot from 3, and then that ability to get to the free throw line is just going to pile the points up. So he's the most likely, but I think Durant is the one that I would bet on if challenged to do so. But I don't even think he'd accept the challenge because, he's looking for titles at this point, not 100-point games.
Could you see like a Lillard or a Curry canning like 20, 25 threes in a game to make it like really, really interesting, just hoist bombing away?
Yeah, if they took 40 or 50 of them, yeah, I mean, because these guys can shoot from the logo, which is just mind blowing.
I got to look up what the record is for the most 3-point attempts in a game.
Yeah, it's probably going to be Curry.
They're
Lillard.
Also efficient from three.
Well, that's the thing. Steph's a 44% career shooter from three. Clay's like 43%. Those guys, if they hoisted up 30 and got really hot, they could hit 16 to 18 of them. But that's still only getting you halfway there. I mean, just think about that. That's 25 points per quarter. That's insane. You know, when a guy has a 25-point quarter, you go, wow, that guy's incredible. He's having a great night. Well, Wilt had the equivalent of 4 25-point quarters. And he hit his free throws. That's what made that so incredible. A 51% career free throw shooter hit 88% of his free throws that night, going 28 for 32. That was the difference. And that, just look at the points that Wilt Chamberlain left on the table because he couldn't shoot free throws. I mean, it was as bad as Shaq as a free throw shooter, if not worse.
Yeah. Wilt Chamberlain, we talked about this before the show, Sep. He kind of gets forgot about when you're talking. I mean, everybody remembers the 100-point game, obviously, because it's freakish. But no one ever brings him up as the greatest player of all time. And I think there's some fair points as to why he considering his dominance statistically, he didn't win the amount of titles that you would have expected. He won 2, one in LA, right, and one with the Philadelphia Warriors.
Yep, Philadelphia in 1967.
So one of 2
years that Bill Russell did win it. Yeah, and then in 72 with the Lakers, didn't have Elgin Baylor. Baylor got hurt early in that year, so I think Baylor is the greatest player in NBA history without a title. And Jerry West and Gail Goodrich, they had a loaded team. They won 69 games that year. So yeah, he only has 2 titles, and Wilt's almost like a sideshow.
Yeah, do you think people look at it like he was so big and so tall that it almost was like it almost takes away from what he was able to accomplish because he
wasn't fair.
Yeah, it wasn't fair. Exactly.
I mean, I know a friend of mine who's essentially the same age of Wilt Chamberlain, if Wilt was still alive, who played against him in high school and said that, you know, Wilt's the greatest athlete this country's ever produced. Just think of the sheer size of the guy. 7'1", 275. There was a point in the 70s where a lot of people thought he may have been the strongest man in the world. He also was playing beach volleyball in his 40s. I mean, the guy was a physical marvel. And the player I compared to Wilt that's playing now is LeBron, just like physically better than everybody else, and maybe didn't have the killer attitude because they were just physically better than everyone else. You know, it's like the big kid on the playground is kind of nice to everybody. Whereas, you know, the Jordans or the Kobes got that killer instinct because they're maybe the runt in the group, so they have to keep proving themselves. But, Wilt was kind of a sideshow, right, because of the size. It was almost like a circus act. And so people forget him. Look, I have him as the 5th greatest player of all time. I have LeBron, Jordan, Russell, and Kareem ahead of Wilt. I have Wilt number 5 ahead of Magic and Bird. His numbers are ridiculous. I mean, he led the league in assists one year. He just came to camp and he said, I'm going to lead the league in assists this year. And okay, he did.
Yeah, just going on his basketball reference page. It's worth a watch because it's like looks like somebody made an error putting in the numbers.
Right. It's like Wayne Gretzky's number.
Every season you're like, what the hell? He averaged 25 rebounds in an off year?
Right, yeah. There's certain athletes like Babe Ruth in baseball, Wayne Gretzky in hockey, Wilt Chamberlain in basketball. They kind of, the numbers don't look right. And Jim Brown also in football because he led the NFL in rushing 8 out of 9 years. Those are the
Barry
4
Bonds
guys.
too.
Well, Barry Bonds too, yeah. And Barry was a better all-around player than Ruth because he was an 8-time Gold Glove left fielder and stole over 500 bases. But when Ruth was doing it, no one was even coming close. Ruth one year hit 60 home runs. No other team in the American League hit 60 home runs. We know what Gretzky's numbers look like and Wilt's numbers look like. And I don't think any of those guys are the greatest in their particular sport, but they just blew away the competition when it came to numbers. So Wilt does get forgotten quite a bit because he doesn't have the championships. And now it's all about championships, right? Like we just discount anyone that hasn't won a bunch of championships. So he sometimes gets forgotten. He's also been gone for over 20 years.
Mm.
He died very, very young. So it's just kind of a weird thing with Wilt. I don't see anybody doing this. Again, I think your point is someone's going to get silly hot from three, get to the free throw line a lot, hit them. The player that answers those two questions is James Harden, more so than anyone else. Can Curry get to the free throw line? Can Lillard get to the free throw line as often as Harden? Probably not. They could certainly get hot from
Harden's
three.
The best player in my lifetime that I've ever seen get to the free throw line. Yeah. And, I lived through, the tail end of Jordan. Harden's the best I've ever seen at doing it.
Yeah.
In part because he flops like crazy and gets calls. Yeah. But, that doesn't take away from the fact that he's actually still going to the free throw line. So regardless of the flopping, he's getting calls. And that's the only, like I said, Seth, that's the only way to do it. You have to go bananas from three and stop the clock. You can't I know there's no footage of the game that he scored 100 points in, but I would assume that it was a lot of just to lob it up to Wilt Chamberlain. He's going to hold the ball over his head like a bully in high school and then just, drop it in the basket. And that's probably what they ran on every single play, except for the ones where he got fouled. And I'm sure the fouls are like, tackle him, hack him to the ground, do whatever.
Well, he was so strong. If you didn't foul him hard, he was going to put the ball
take him out by the legs
into the basket. I mean, again, as physically imposing as Shaq was, Wilt was more physically imposing because he was playing in a different era against smaller guys, and he was a better athlete than Shaq. He was actually like in tremendous shape. Shaq used to take the summer off, not really stay in shape, show up to camp 20 pounds overweight and play himself into shape. Wilt was an elite athlete who was always in shape. He was too vain not to be. He used to go on the talk show circuit wearing a tank top. We saw LeBron earlier in the week with no shirt on at his press conference. Well, Wilt wore the tank top, into his 50s and still had the physique to back it up. So, yeah, I think that Harden's the most likely. I think if Durant, again, has the game to do it without question because he's so damn efficient, he can score anywhere he wants, but he doesn't go to the line as often as Harden, so there's not going to be those natural breaks. And Harden is more durable than Durant. He plays more minutes. He misses far fewer games. And I think being left-handed also is a big advantage for Harden. It does screw up how you defend the guy, because you just don't see many lefties.
Doesn't expend any effort defensively.
That's another thing.
Of his career. So
right, exactly.
I think also with Wilt in that game, and again, I want you to talk about how there's no footage from it in a second, and if you have any conspiracy theories, the fatigue thing is a factor. And when you're just getting the ball lobbed to you in the paint and you just, putting it up in the air and just dropping it in the basket, you're not expending that much effort offensively. Like he probably wasn't getting tired that much that game.
Right. He's not creating his own shot. Harden would be creating his own shot. Durant would be creating his own shot.
At
but
some
also
point you run out of gas.
You do. Yeah. I mean, I get tired watching Harden play sometimes, because the usage rate is ridiculous. Where with Wilt, he's going to go down, catch pass from the point guard, be in position to score. But Wilt would also give you a lot of the defensive end. He would dominate the defensive boards.
Like Curry, say, okay, the scenario I posited where he cans 25 threes in a game, which, that would be far exceeding what the record is right now. He'd probably have to launch 50 of them. Your arms feel like jelly after you shoot 50.
Sure.
Go to your nearest park right now. Shoot 15 of them. Your arms feel tired after 15 attempts.
Yeah, right. And play the other end of the court. I mean, I know Curry's not a great defensive player, but he still has to go out there and show some effort on the defensive end. Yeah, it's difficult to really see this ever happening. It's one of those records that won't be broken. But the record that absolutely will not be broken is that Wilt averaged 48 and a half minutes per game for an entire season.
Yeah, that
blows my mind. That just blows my mind. He never sat down. He never fouled out in his entire career, and he played like every minute of every game. I don't care what he was doing on the court. He could have been sitting down on the court, drinking a cup of coffee. It's still being out on the court. I mean, the man's
if you're sitting down on the court, he's still the tallest player in the court.
Still the tallest guy there. Yeah, still unstoppable because him sitting down, he'd still be, as big as Muggsy Bogues at least.
Is it a national tragedy that there's no footage of this game?
Sure. Yeah, but I mean, that's the NBA though, Jed. I mean, the NBA in 1962, man, baseball was far ahead of it. Football was far ahead of it. Horse racing was far ahead of it. Boxing was far ahead of it. Every sport was ahead of basketball. Heck, the NHL was a bigger product than the NBA in 1962. Even locally, the Celtics were winning championship after championship, and it was no big deal. The high schools in the area would draw more attention than the Celtics. So it wasn't really the sport it is now, not even close. It was on radio, but it wasn't on TV. And it is a shame that we see a record that's probably never going to be approached, let alone broken, and there's no footage of it. It's a shame, but it's what it is. And I can't see them. How do you possibly retrieve anything like this? If there's a Zapruder film or something comes along, someone mysteriously had a camera at the game. Yeah, just play it out again and have someone play Wilt Chamberlain and show how he scored 100. And who's going to play Wilt Chamberlain in a movie? There's not a lot of 7'1" actors, or you'd really have to do some trick photography there.
Taco
could play him, yes, because he's quite as graceful an athlete as Wilt Chamberlain. I think of Taco and Wilt Chamberlain in the same vein.
Yeah, well, I bet you Taco, if he had played in the NBA in 1962, he would have averaged at least 20 points a game, right?
No?
10. Okay, 10. He would have been a foot taller than everybody else.
True. But I don't know how he'd get up and down the court more than twice without.
Well, who says he has to go up and down? Fall. Just stay up the court. To play 4-on-5 defensively.
Yeah, cherry pick. Just hang down the other end.
Yeah, I just would love to see how he did. I mean, we know how he did it because there's written reports, but there's also written reports of the Civil War, which was 100 years before that. So you would have liked to see some video footage of it, but it's really a shame that there's not. So we just have to kind of wonder in our heads. Again, the picture in my head is like the schoolyard bully who's just keeping the ball above everybody else's head.
Yeah,
and I'm pretty sure that's more or less what was happening in that game. But it is the 59th anniversary of it, so it's fun to talk about. And I feel like every year on the anniversary, it should be talked about because it is one of, if not the most momentous statistical achievement in sports in a single game. I don't know what you would put that seems more insurmountable for a single game in any sport that seems like a more insurmountable record.
Yeah, it'd be like throwing for 600 yards in a football game, right, for a quarterback. And we've seen that in college. Mahomes and Baker Mayfield put up like 1,200 yards combined when they were at Texas Tech and Oklahoma. But that's college football in the Big 12. Someone hitting 6 home runs in baseball, going 6 for 6 with 6 home runs.
That's the equivalent, right?
Or, like 6 goals in hockey. Mario Lemieux, who I believe is the greatest hockey player ever, once had a game where he scored 5 goals 5 different ways. He had like an even strength goal, a power play goal, a shorthanded goal, an empty net goal, and a penalty shot. So the 5 different ways you could score a goal. He had one of each in one game. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, but saying in hockey, it would have to be because people have scored 4 goals or in a game.
5 goals, yeah, sure,
right, 5
6
goals.
even. I believe
it would have to be like it'd have to be like 12 in a game because again, the next closest person to Wilt is Kobe with 81, which is 19 points away. So it's really not that close to him.
And a guy who most people think is the greatest player ever, Michael Jordan. His career high is 69. He's 31 below Wilt. That's a big gap.
Again, like the record in hockey is 6 in a game.
I believe so. Yeah.
But it would have to be something bananas because the second closest to it is 5. It's not that big of a difference.
It'd be like 10 or 11 goals in hockey. Yeah.
And in football, like you're right. What's the record? Is like it's got to be like 530.
It's 5. I believe Norm Van Brocken's in the 540 range. I mean, Brady threw for 505 in the Super Bowl loss to the Eagles.
It would be if someone threw for like 650 yards in a football game or something like, or
exactly.
and threw like 8 touchdowns, like an insane something that's never going to happen.
Or
because that game would be a blowout and the quarterback would be pulled.
Bowling more than a 300, which is not possible.
Right,
so it's the highest score.
No, I think it's the most impressive record in a single game in sports.
Yep. Absolutely.
I guess maybe if you rushed for like 400 yards in a game or something like that.
That would be something along those lines. Yeah, I mean, because you're just doubling what is normally a great game. A 50-point game is incredible. This guy averaged that in a season and then doubled it in one game. It's
insane. And remember, they didn't track blocks. I'm sure he had a bunch of quadruple doubles.
Oh God,
Bill Russell too.
There was one tweet out this week that I saw that he reached doubles in 5 categories: points, rebounds, assists, steals, and blocks. It was like I looked at it and go, this is like a week for someone. This is like a month for someone. and Wilt did
Yeah,
it in one game.
ridiculous. If they tracked blocks, he'd have the block record by a country mile, and Bill Russell would be second by a country mile.
Wouldn't it be close? Third, I wouldn't even know. It would.
No, like
wouldn't even guess.
Who has the record now? I don't know who has. I don't know off the top of my head who has, but it wouldn't be close. It would be far distant.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, he was a freak, like you said. It was like almost a sideshow. He was just the numbers are astronomical. So happy anniversary, Wilt Chamberlain. Rest in peace. 100-point game. I don't think that him or any of his ancestors have anything to worry about that being broken anytime soon, unless like an 8.5-footer comes into the NBA from Mars.
But with the athletic ability of Wilt Chamberlain, that's not likely. I mean, that's the thing that's forgotten about Wilt and Bill Russell. Now, Bill Russell was 6'9". They were both phenomenal athletes. It wasn't like they were just bigger than everybody else and, just put their arms up. I mean, Bill Russell was also a track star. These guys were just out-of-world athletes, and then they took it and used that ability on the court with the skill on the court, and that's why, I think Russell's the third greatest player ever, and Wilt's the fifth greatest player ever.
I mean, I just before we move on to the next thing, I think as great as Wilt's statistical numbers are, and they're the greatest statistical numbers in the NBA. I mean, they're just bonkers, but they played in the same era, Russell and Wilt Chamberlain.
Right.
And Chamberlain won 2 titles and Russell won 11. So I find it, I don't know how you can put one guy over. They both played on tremendous teams too. So it's not like Wilt was playing by himself. So multiple Hall of Famers in each of those teams. That's just my biased Boston opinion. Sap, do you want to play a game of either or? Pick 'em.
Yeah, I like that. Either or. That sounds fun.
Either or. I'm going to give you 2 players.
Okay.
Neither one of them is gonna break Wilt Chamberlain's 100-point game anytime soon.
Okay.
But I want you to tell me which one you're gonna start a franchise with. Are you ready? Okay.
I'm always ready.
Hand on the buzzer.
Okay.
Ben Simmons of the Philadelphia 76ers and Jayson Tatum of my Boston Celtics. Who do you got?
Ben Simmons.
Okay, you're already wrong.
I'm already wrong. Why you bother debating at this point? Because you're right. I know you're going to pick Jayson Tatum. I think that when you look at these two players,
very wrong.
Very wrong. Very wrong. Terrible fake news. Ben Simmons is better than Jayson Tatum. Look, if you could take the best parts of both of these players, you'd have an all-time great player, right? Because you got Tatum is an excellent deep shooter, excellent mid-range shooter. When he chooses to, he's very good at going to the basket. He's a natural scorer, a natural shooter. We know all that. He's a guy who at some point in his career could average 28, 29 a game, could actually win a scoring title at some point. Those are things Ben Simmons does not do well. Ben Simmons is not a good shooter, doesn't really even attempt many shots. I believe he's attempted 31 three-pointers in his entire career, and he's in his 4th season. So he's not a three-point threat. He's not really a good free throw shooter either. So that kind of takes away a little bit of his drive game because, when you drive to the basket, if you get fouled, he's going to go to the free throw line and hit only 60% from the free throw line. But everything else, Ben Simmons does at the very highest level. We're talking about a guy who is capable of averaging 10 rebounds and 10 assists a game. His career averages are pretty darn close to that. I believe he's about 8 rebounds and 7.5 assists per game.
I have it right here. 16.3 points, 8.3 rebounds, 7.9 assists per game.
Yeah. So he's
average.
So he's a 16, 8 and 8 guy essentially, right? That's pretty good.
Career average.
If he ever gets a scoring career average, if he gets a scoring average up to 20, that's he's going to have a year where he goes 20, 10, and 10. I can just see that happening. Now, I think the biggest difference between the two players is on the defensive end. Simmons is arguably. He thinks he's the best defensive player in the league, and he's certainly in the discussion. We saw last week he kind of locked up Luka Doncic when they beat Dallas, and Doncic exploded on the Celtics, and Jaylen Brown, and Jayson Tatum really never accepted the challenge to cover him. Simmons is a much better defender than Jayson Tatum. He's a better rebounder. He's a better passer. He's not the scorer that Jayson Tatum is. I've always had an affinity to guys who pass. I mean, LeBron's my favorite player. One of the reasons is because I think he's the best passer in the sport and has been for a dozen years. I loved Magic Johnson because he was the best passer of his era. I look to guys who make their teammates better, and I think Ben Simmons does that
Are you
more
starting
than
to fall in
Jayson
love
Tatum.
with LaMelo Ball? Is that your next guy?
I'm impressed. I'm very impressed with him. He has
Because
surprised
he's a heck
me.
of a passer.
He's a great passer. He rebounds. He defends.
He might
He's
be
a
your
better
new guy,
shooter.
Sap.
I don't know. I mean, LeBron's still got 3 or 4 years remaining.
Got to embrace the Ball family.
I may, absolutely. I love LeVar Ball. I think that we need more guys like him in sports because he's entertaining, right? I mean, he loves his sons. He's a bit much at times, but we need more of that in sports. So I would take Ben Simmons. Now, there's a difference in age of about a year and a half. Tatum just turned 23
today. Happy birthday!
Happy birthday to JT. 23. He looks like 5 years younger. I think he grows the beard and the hair to just kind of look a little bit older. And Simmons is about a year and a half older. And Simmons did miss his first year because of the foot. It was kind of a redshirt season. The odd thing about this, Jet, is these guys could have very easily been teammates. If Philadelphia was smarter, remember in 2017, the Celtics won the draft lottery, and then they traded it to Philadelphia because Danny Ainge had a sneaking suspicion that Markelle Fultz was going to be the first pick for Philadelphia and that Lonzo Ball was going to be the second pick with the Lakers, so that would leave Jayson Tatum to the Celtics at number 3. If Philly, pulled a 180 and said, we're going to take Jayson Tatum. I mean, could you picture Jayson Tatum, Ben Simmons, and Joel Embiid on the same team? That would be nuts because
they screwed that up badly.
Yeah, and then Markelle Fultz, who I just feel badly that he's never really taken off, and then when he finally took off, he blew out his knee. Won't be back till next year. But I would take Simmons. He's a little older, which I think he's just approaching his prime. Where I think Tatum maybe 2 or 3 years away from his prime. Neither guy is a killer out there. I don't think they're an alpha. I think they're more comfortable being the number 2 guy on their team. They have a similar personality, kind of docile. They're not really aggressive even on the court. But because Simmons is a far superior defender, rebounder, and passer, I'm going to take him over Jayson Tatum. It's close. I think they're both excellent players. They were both third-team All-NBA last year. So last year they were considered 2 of the top 15 players in the league. They're going to be going to the All-Star game this weekend. But Ben Simmons was first-team All-Defensive NBA last year, and I think he'll do the same this year. Tatum is a decent defender when he's engaged. Simmons is an elite defender, and I think that's the difference.
It's hard to argue with you on the defensive side. I do think that Tatum's slightly underrated defensively. This year has been a disaster for every Celtics on the defensive side, except for Marcus Smart, but he's been out for a while now. I agree with you that Simmons, it's among the 3 or 4 best on-ball defenders in the league, which should, in today's NBA, qualify you as the best defender, because that's why I don't like Gobert winning Defensive Player of the Year all the time, because I think it's just so much more important to play perimeter defense in today's NBA than, who's really putting up big numbers in the post, like 1 or 2 guys. So I think that, it's him, Kawhi Leonard, Marcus Smart. There's a small amount of guys who are that great on-ball defenders.
Do you know who leads the NBA in defensive win shares heading into the All-Star break?
I'm going to assume it's Ben Simmons.
Nope, it's LeBron James.
Oh, it shouldn't be.
Well, it is. That's a metric. That's not an opinion.
Nope, it's an opinion.
Okay.
The numbers are wrong. Put that out very there. Wrong. Yeah, bad
those numbers are wrong. Right. All the other numbers are right.
Well, he can't get his team to win right now, Sap. That's a bigger problem. But that's for another day. So here's my argument for Jayson Tatum. Again, I'm not going to argue the defense. I think Tatum is a little better than you're giving him credit for defensively, but he's not on Ben Simmons' level at all. The NBA game is the most important thing to me, though, is scoring. And that's why I'm so surprised that you like Ben Simmons so much. I know you love passing, but he's not a smooth player by any regard, Sap. Look at his 3-point shot. Look at his free throw. He is a career 28.6% 3-point shooter, a career 60% free throw shooter. That's terrible. For his size, he should be a far better free throw shooter. The 3-point, listen, it's not for everybody. It should be better than 28%, but the 60% career free throw shooting is unforgivable.
Forget the percentage on the threes. He's only taken 31. So it's like if he had hit 2 more, he'd be a 30%
right
3-point shooter. So I don't even count that. The percentage doesn't mean anything. The free throw shooting is a problem because if he was a 75% free throw shooter, then he'd be more willing to go to the basket. We remember in the playoffs a few years ago, he was turning down layups because he thought he was going to get fouled and didn't want to go to the free throw line.
He had a 1-point game against the Celtics in the playoffs. A 1-point game.
Yeah. But I think he's a more unique player. Not that there's a lot of guys like Jayson Tatum. It's just there's a lot of scores in the league. How do you stop scores? You play.
He's definitely a unique player. He's a triple-double threat every night for sure. So here's Tatum's career averages: 18 points per game, 6 rebounds per game, 2.5 assists per game. Obviously, nowhere near the passer that Ben Simmons is. Simmons is a point guard in a power forward's body. Tatum's gotten better as a passer as his career's progressed, but he's never going to be as good as Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons is just extremely gifted there. The rebounding also getting better and the scoring getting better too. This is what I like about Tatum and why I take him, Sap. I think he's improved every year. Here's his scoring numbers. Rookie, 13.9. Next year, 15.7, 23.4. This year, he's at 25 points per game. Ben Simmons' numbers are flat scoring. 15.8, 16.9, 16, actually going down, 16.4, 16 points per game. I don't see considerable improvement in Ben Simmons' game in the areas that he's not good at, or he needs to work on. He is not. Jayson Tatum came into the league as a poor defender. He's improved at that point. He was a poor passer. He's gotten better at it. Ben Simmons came into the league as a tremendous passer, a physically gifted athlete, a tremendous rebounder, and has gotten better defensively. I'll say that to the point where he's elite, but he hasn't taken the things that people have criticized him on since his career began and worked or been able to improve them at all. And I think that's something that I point to and say, that's a problem for me. The areas that he's already good at, okay, he's getting better at, but the areas that he's a more of a liability on, he hasn't shown the ability or willingness to improve in those areas.
No, I can buy that. I mean, he's not improved as a shooter whatsoever. And the thing about Simmons, and when I look at his shot and he's left-handed, sometimes I feel like he's shooting with his wrong hand, that he's really right-handed, but he is shooting with his left hand. Now, you remember Lonzo Ball's first year or two in the league? We had the ugliest looking jump shot.
Yes.
Like it was coming from the right side of his head. It was coming from the left side of his head as opposed to the right side of his head, and he's a right-handed shooter. He's fixed that. He's worked his ass off to become a pretty darn good three-point shooter. I mean, does not look like the same shooter. So the problem is when you're at a level like Simmons or Tatum, these ascending stars, sometimes you don't work to tweak your game, and that's not a good thing. The all-time greats tweak their game, right? Jordan and Kobe, even Larry Bird became pretty damn dominant from the post. LeBron has become a better three-point shooter than he was when he first came into the league. So the all-time greats see where they need to improve. That's a knock against Simmons. Look, I think Simmons and Tatum can be near great players. I think they have the same type of personality. They've had a lot early, a lot of success, right? Because we remember when Simmons was being recruited out of Australia, he was like the number one recruit.
He was the number one recruit in the country.
Went to LSU. His team didn't even make the tournament. He put up great numbers. Tatum was the number one high school player, right? Coming out of high school, went to Duke. I mean, I talk about a regal program, played 1 year and was drafted by the Celtics. So these are two guys. I'm not going to say they were spoiled, but they're so natural and it's come to them somewhat easy that sometimes I don't think they find the need to really work on the smaller parts of their games that need improvement. And
is that why you think the scoring numbers are flat for Ben Simmons?
It could be, yeah. I mean, at some point you've got to be self-aware and say, look, my shot's not good right now. I've got to get better at this.
So why isn't he playing the post more?
That's a great question. I mean, you got Embiid, but Embiid can also face the basket. I've always felt that if you're a great passer, if you can go down to the post, Magic Johnson used to do this. I wish LeBron James would do more of it. I think Simmons can do this. When you're an elite passer and you're able to go down in the post, it opens up so much for your teammates, and it opens up so much for you because now they start
basically
to play
how the Nuggets play every single possession
with Jokic. Yeah, and look at the numbers he puts up. So I think that's something that you want to see more from Ben Simmons.Maybe they're just trying to save him because he's an elite defender, and that's a big part of what he brings to the 76ers. I was impressed last week because Doncic is a walking 30, 10, and 10 guy, and he really, locked him up. And that's
No,
a
he's a
tough guy to
tremendous
defend.
defender, but again, so is Kawhi Leonard, and Kawhi Leonard can score 25 points a game.
Sure. But not from the beginning of his career. I mean,
No, he's gotten better, but I haven't seen Simmons get better scoring the ball at all. Like I just showed you, the numbers are flat to down.
Yeah. No, he's got
his highest scoring average was his second year, and it's gone down since then. I don't know if it's how they use him, like if he has to play in the post more, if he has to be willing to take more 3-pointers, but he's got to improve his scoring. Sap, the defense is there, absolutely, but you can, just because you extend a lot of effort defensively and you're elite defensively doesn't mean that you have to be stagnant offensively. And of these two guys, he by far has the better teammate. I mean, I love Jaylen Brown, but Joel Embiid is the front runner for MVP this year.
Right.
So you would think that would open up more scoring opportunities for him.
It should. That hasn't always been a really good match, though. I mean, I think that oftentimes with Embiid and Simmons, the whole is less than the sum of their parts. Like sometimes I think they step on each other's toes. In fact, there were talks last year through the media that maybe it was time to move on from one of them, make one of those guys the team, and then fill in the gaps by trading the other guy. It seems to be working better this year because they finally have a reliable NBA coach in Doc Rivers, who I think is kind of figuring it out.
And the proof will be in the playoffs. I mean, what they do in the playoffs.
Absolutely. And we may see the Sixers and the Celtics again in the playoffs. They've met twice before, and the Celtics won both series, won 4-1, won 4-0. Simmons didn't play in last year's playoffs. He got hurt late in the regular season.
Advantage Tatum, by the way. He is 4-1 against Ben Simmons in the playoffs. 8-1 against the Philadelphia 76ers.
Yeah. Oh, without question. Without question. I think this year you'd probably favor Philadelphia a little bit because, again, Doc Rivers closes the gap on coaching, and Tobias Harris is there and more comfortable. And they finally surrounded Simmons and Embiid with really good 3-point shooters. So the construction of the team, I think, is a little bit better. But we're talking about two guys that right now I would put 15, 16, 17, 18, somewhere in there. If we're power ranking all the players in the league, they both are going to grow because they're both young. Tatum may have the higher ceiling because we're talking about a guy who could lead the league in scoring.
Well, the last question for you, Sap, between these two, which one of them is more likely to win an MVP in their career?
I would say neither. I mean, MVP is tough.
That's not an answer.
Well, I mean, Kevin Durant has one MVP, so he's better than both of these guys. I'm going to say that Simmons has a chance to win an MVP at some point because if he figures it out offensively, and we're talking about 22 to 24 points per game to go along with 10 rebounds, 10 assists, which I think is likely for him at some point, and Defensive Player of the Year, his breadth of skills are pretty amazing if he figures out how to score. I would say Simmons can win an MVP because I think he also is a little closer to being on a potentially number one seeded team at this point than Tatum because the Celtics do have some issues they're going to have to correct. Philadelphia is playing better than the Celtics this year, although not exponentially better because the East is kind of jumbled at the top with Brooklyn, Philadelphia, and Milwaukee. But I would still stick with Simmons for that because I think he could have one of those years where it's like, holy crap, this guy finally figured it out offensively.
Yeah, the reason I wouldn't say Simmons there is because I don't think he's ever going to be the best player on that 76ers team. So unless he gets traded, Embiid is the better player, and he'll put up the better numbers. So, you stand out a lot more. Tatum should be, although this year I'd say Jaylen Brown has been the best player in the Celtics. But I think most people expect Tatum to be the one on the Celtics. By virtue of the role that he's in, I would say he's more likely to win it. But I would agree with your first assessment that probably neither of them will win it. It's not an easy award to win.
No, it's not. I mean, again, when you look at it, Shaq won one, Kobe won one, Kevin Durant won one. These are all-time great players.
I took a big futures bet when Zion came in the league. It was over-under was 1.5 MVPs, and I took the under on that.
Yeah, you're not a big Zion fan. I'm more of a Zion fan than you are.
I like him. It's just like you said, it's hard to win the award. So if it's 1.5, he has to win 2 MVPs.
Right.
I mean, that puts him ahead of Kobe Bryant and Kevin Durant and Kevin Garnett. I mean, there's a lot of people he has to get more MVPs then. So I'd play it safe there and say take the under. If I'm sure that's probably still the number is 1.5. I would say under.
Jet, the year that Wilt scored 50 points per game, the year that he scored 100 points in a game, he wasn't even in the league MVP. It was Bill Russell.
as it should have been.
Right. Well, that was also a year that like Elgin Baylor had a ridiculous year. Jerry West had a ridiculous year. Oscar Robertson averaged a triple-double. There were like 5 candidates. And we talked about this in the last podcast, that not all MVPs are the same. I mean, the 61-62 NBA MVP, you had 5 legitimate, when I say legitimate, all deserving of being MVP, and it was Bill Russell who won it.
Yeah. Well, another Boston-Philadelphia rivalry.
Yeah, there wasn't much of a rivalry, to be honest with you, except in the late 70s, early 80s. I mean,
in fairness, Sap, it hasn't been much of a rivalry lately with the Celtics and 76ers. I mean, the Sixers are better this year, it seems like, but the Celtics have pretty much wiped the floor with them.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it was a rivalry, I'd say, from 1977 to 1985, like a 8-year stretch there when Dr. J was there. They met several times in the playoffs, and the Sixers got the better of the Celtics in those playoffs. So that was a real rivalry. That was actually the rivalry in the early 80s. It was Bird, Dr. J. It was Boston, Philly, more so than Boston, LA, because the Celtics and Philly, like every year, met in the Eastern Conference Finals, and those were wars.
Yeah, in order to be a true rivalry, each team's got to be winning games. And
yeah, I mean, the hammer and the nail don't have a rivalry.
Yeah. Yep, that's true, Seth. The hammer has been doing well for quite some time in that
Much
one.
better than the nail.
All right, well, we will be back on Friday with another edition of the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. We'll be looking ahead to the All-Star game, maybe giving you some predictions for that and the dunk contest and the three-point contest, all of which are taking place in the same time span. We'll also look ahead to the second half of the season. We'll be doing that a little bit on Friday and some next week. So plenty more to talk about. Again, happy birthday to Jayson Tatum. Happy anniversary to Wilt Chamberlain for your 100-point game. We are the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Sap, it's always a pleasure doing this with you.
Yes, sir.
All right. Any plans to celebrate the Wilt Chamberlain anniversary?
Yeah, I'm going to sleep with 20,000 women.
Okay, that's a more in my mind. That's the greater record. That's the one that should be celebrated more. So
by
congratulations
and you know
on
what?
that.
He did it. I don't doubt that.
You have no doubt in your mind?
Women. No, hell no. No, I mean, you talk about his sexual prime was probably 45 years. I think he died when he was in early 60s. So do the math. Yeah, I believe that. Absolutely.
What percentage of the population of Los Angeles do you think is related to Wilt Chamberlain?
Oh, probably a lot. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Wilt was very active.
He's like the modern day Genghis Khan.
Yeah, pretty much.
Isn't there like 2% of the world population has the same like genetic code as him?
Yeah.
So good job by Wilt Chamberlain, modern day Genghis Khan, conqueror of the basketball court, conqueror of sexual conquests. Happy anniversary to him. Again, we are the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage.